Have you ever looked around at the things other people are doing and the lives they're living and feel like yours just doesn't measure up? In today's episode, we're going to get to the root of that type of thinking and blast it out of existence in your life for good. Because as a creating maven, you don't have time for this. You're going to learn how to live out the second C in the 5-part series I kicked off last time called The 5 C's of a Creating Maven, which is all about the characteristics you need so that you can make your unique contribution and get paid to be you. Today is all about living without comparison. Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create. Let me cut to the chase and bottom line this for you. It is impossible to not compare if you're looking. After all, our eyes are made by design to compare, to see contrast, to see differences, to make distinctions. This is what helps you tell the difference between fire and water, the difference between the rocky ground and the edge of a cliff. Being able to compare saves your life every single day. Comparing and making distinctions is the very essence of seeing. And if you're going to see so that you don't trip up over your own feet, you're going to have to look. And if you're looking, you're comparing. When it comes to this basic act of comparing to see, it is all well and good. But the real trouble starts when we're doing this with ourselves and other people and overlaying what we see with stories of one-upmanship or one-downmanship. And this is when comparing becomes a problem. When what we're seeing is what we use to tell ourselves we are better or worse than other people, that we're ahead of things or we're falling behind or whatever we tell ourselves, that's when we're getting into a whole heap of trouble. But most importantly, when what we're seeing and comparing ourselves to is stopping us from creating, we are really out of line. This is a bad habit and it's got to stop. One of my favorite quotes is something that's attributed to President Teddy Roosevelt. And he said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And oh my goodness, is that so true? We've all lived and experienced the truth of these wise words. And a lot of the time it's over very silly and superficial stuff. And it almost always ends very badly for us. I bet even right now, you can think of a specific time when you've compared yourself to someone who you thought was better looking, smarter, richer, or more popular than you, or just who had it all together in your opinion, right? From what you were seeing. And every time you did it, or every time you do this, you're not just looking and admiring, you're feeling smaller and smaller about yourself and more unsure of yourself. And maybe you turn inward and start to sulk and go off into a corner, or maybe you get aggressive with other people and put them down to make yourself feel better, even though you know you shouldn't. Either way, it doesn't end well. Not for you or anyone else around you. Comparing yourself to others can awaken a beast of a horrid monster inside of us that crashes through our world and threatens to eat everything in its wake. It makes us feel small and invisible and can really make us feel like we don't belong. And worse, we can feel like we don't have anything to offer. And so there's nothing that we're doing that's worth anything. And as you know, to me, this is the ultimate and greatest tragedy, that our sense of self and worth can get wrecked by this activity. And for you as a creating maven, the risk is even greater because the worst possibility is that you stop creating or that you hide what you create because you think it's not worth being seen. So let's get a handle on this and make comparing a thing of your past. And before I go into what I want to share about helping you to stop comparing, I just want to acknowledge that this is not an easy thing to do. This is not an easy thing that I'm asking. I struggle with it. It's a challenge for me as well because our environment is set up in a way that we compare constantly. Marketing and everything that we see, the pings and notifications on our phone, social media, just general media, or just even general conversations with people in our life. Everything is set up just put us in a scenario where we're telling stories about ourselves and comparing. So I understand that this is a systemic environmental thing that I am challenging and asking us to go against, but it is not impossible. But I just want to acknowledge that this is a hard thing to do. So how do we stop comparing? Well, one, let's acknowledge that there is nothing inherently wrong with comparing. It's a necessary life skill. And as I shared in the beginning, when we're comparing, we're not doing anything bad or terrible. We're just making observations. And so that's the first thing to keep in mind, that there is nothing really inherently wrong with comparing. I don't want you to guilt yourself or feel bad as we're going into this process. Whenever you find yourself comparing, to feel like, oh, I'm doing this terrible thing. I'm doing, like I need to smack my hand and, I'm naughty or anything like that. No, there is nothing inherently wrong with comparing. It's a necessary life skill. So let's just take that as point number one. Let's take out all the guilting and all the shaming that could come from this activity. So that's number one. Nothing inherently wrong with it. Two, when we do compare, let's decide that we're going to make this a no personal stories zone. When you see things, when you're comparing or making observations, decide that you're not allowed to turn what you see into anything that's about you. You're not allowed to tell a story about yourself based on what you're seeing out there that's going on with other people. Their looks, their lives, their choices are not about you. You must dethrone yourself as the central figure in all the stories that are not your own. Stop inserting yourself into everything. It's not about you. And this is tough because this is the root a lot of times of our problems. We tell these stories about not just other people, but about ourselves. This person just, won this award. Instead of making that observation and just saying, oh, they won an award. It's like, oh, they won an award. Well, what does that say about me? Why didn't I get an award? That's where the trouble and the problem comes in. So to stop comparing and having comparing be something that's dangerous to us, we need to, this number 2 point, get into the practice of saying that when we're observing and seeing things, we're going to make it a no personal stories zone. It's not about me. I'm not going to tell a story about myself based on what I'm seeing. And third, sometimes we just have to stop looking. I know that it's hard and it's difficult, but you're a creating maven who should be spending more time creating than consuming. This is going to require you to be radical about your attention. This is about attention management because you can't operate the same way everybody else does. And there are many tips and challenges that are out there that are available for this. There are like endless articles about taking notifications off your phone or having what my accountability partner and I did in episode 17, which was having an input deprivation week. Or if you've read Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism, he has something that's all about that. There's so many people who are writing books and articles about how to get your attention and manage your attention. And it's so important because this is what we need to do, to pay attention to what we're consuming and what we're taking in so that we can be more intentional about it. And also notice how we feel when we take certain things in. Notice what it does to your creating power. Do more noticing and then do even more than just notice. Let's do something about it. Let's not just be passive and accept the world that we're in and all the things that come our way to take our attention as something to tolerate. Remember, we're not tolerating anymore this year. This is one of the things that we left in last year and we agreed to in episode 24 when we talked about say no to end the year. We're letting go of all the things that we've been tolerating that's holding us back. And one of these is this accepting this bombardment and shredding of our attention. Now we're going to set ourselves up for the best. And that means tackling our environment and the input that's constantly coming in, attacking and challenging what is drawing our attention away. And sometimes it just has to come to this. You have to find ways to stop looking. This practice of not looking is to help you stay focused, to help you maintain your energy and to create. And it also does something else. It helps you to keep you from leaking out something that is very, very important for you. And that is your confidence. And so these two concepts about comparison and its impact on your confidence are tightly bound together. And it's not that confident people don't compare themselves to others. It's that not comparing is what helps them to maintain true, authentic confidence. if you want authentic confidence, not arrogance, which is brittle, but we'll talk about that more in the next episode. Authentic confidence and how comparison, or rather not comparing, is so interwoven and tightly linked in with it. And so this is it. This is how we can start the practice of reducing comparing and all the stories that we tell around comparing that damage us. One, we're going to acknowledge that there is nothing inherently wrong with comparing. It's a necessary life skill. So we're going to get away from guilting and shaming ourselves about those moments when we do. And two, we're going to make, when we are observing and comparing and noticing other things around us, we're going to make those no personal story zones. We're not going to insert ourselves. We're going to be conscious of when we are observing something and then making it about us and asking questions about ourselves. We're going to put a stop to that and say, no, this is not about me. This is about this other person and their choices and their life and their experiences, and it has nothing to do about me. And I'm not going to make it about me. And then we're going to get into the practice of really taking more control of our attention and just try as much as possible to not look. Stop looking. Take off notifications on your phone for different apps or media that you find consistently distract you. Maybe you need to unsubscribe to certain newsletters or certain things, or maybe it's time that you take some time to not watch as much media or news or things that are going to show you a lot of advertising. And this is not just about depriving yourself. This is about creating space so that you can create. And I want you to have more time and more room and more mental space for creating. To not just create before you consume, because I've talked about that a lot, but sometimes setting aside time to create instead of consuming. That's if you take on an input deprivation week. So no more stories about other people and making those stories turn into something about you. It's time to take your attention, manage your attention, and focus so that you can create. There's this word that I heard years ago that I just absolutely love the definition for it, because it helps me to take these principles that I'm sharing with you today to heart and to really live out a life where I'm not centralizing myself in other stories and comparing myself to others. And that is a word that you might have heard, and that's the word sonder. And it's a noun that means the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and as complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, and inherited craziness. An epic story that continues invisibly around you like an anthill sprawling deep underground with elaborate passageways to thousands of other lives that you'll never know existed, in which you might appear only once as an extra, sipping coffee in the background, as a blur of traffic passing on the highway, as a lighted window at dusk. And I love that definition so much, because it's just so liberating to realize that you don't have to be the center of every story that exists out there in the world. And you don't have to make yourself that way, and that there's a gift and a power and a liberation to being in the background of other stories and being focused on your own and in being in that space and letting everything and other people and their joys and their triumphs and all the things that they have to offer and bring to the world, letting that be, and being someone who can appreciate that and experience it from afar sometimes and get some joy from it, but not do that damaging thing where you compare yourself and insert yourself into it. So I want to leave you with that beautiful and I hope liberating definition for yourself as you think about going into the rest of this week and into the rest of this year, getting past this very bad habit that we have of comparing ourselves to others. So here's the plan for this coming week. Let's do a little experiment with your attention. And I want you to think about one thing that you're devoting your attention to today. And I want you to then practice averting your attention from everything else. Practice closing your eyes if you have to. Practice turning off media or different notification that is going to distract you from that one thing. Practice turning away and redirecting your attention back to your focus. And if you notice that when you're looking at people who are doing similar things to you and or even things that you want to do, and you find that you spend your time consuming and comparing and telling stories, make that the thing that's going to be first on your list to not compare and to move your attention away from that. It's time to really take your attention back. You've seen enough. It's time to get back to you and get back to creating. So far in this 5-part series, we've talked about commitment. That was the first episode. And I gave you a reframe on commitment that talked about how we're going to commit this year. It's not going to be in this harsh, tough way, but we're going to just commit to trying again, taking in that compassion and grace and expectation that you're not going to do it perfectly and that you're going to fall down. And all you want to do is to commit to try again. And today we've talked about no comparison and why managing your attention is so important. And even this, you may not do it perfectly. And so I want you to be gracious to yourself and just bring that commitment to this as well, to try again. And as a creating maven, we want to be deliberate and intentional with what we're looking at and where we're putting our attention. We can't leave this to chance or leave this as a habit. We want to be able to get to a place where we're able to look at other things for inspiration, not for comparison. But until then, we're not going to tell these extra stories and we're going to take our attention back and focus, because we do want to get to a place someday where we can look without caving in on ourselves. And we do want to have that authentic confidence that I talked about before. And confidence, the third C of a creating maven, is what I'll talk to you about in the next episode. Are you enjoying the series? If you are, please share this episode or one of your other Reframe to Create episodes. Invite your friends, invite others to listen and join you on this journey. There's so much power in having an accountability partner, and there's so much power in having a listening partner as well. See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to always ask yourself, what will I create?